TED Talks are so often about sharing stories. And we're living in a time when everyone is being encouraged to tell their story. And this can be such a good and powerful thing. But I've learned that some stories should not be told. My story begins on a beautiful spring morning, sunlight streaming through the bedroom window. I rolled over next to my fiancé, and he looked me in the eyes and told me that he didn't want to have sex with me anymore when the lights were on because my body disgusted him. It's true I'd gained a few pounds since we'd started dating. I've been a little overweight my entire life, but to put it in perspective, I weighed less than I do now when he said that to me. Is it really that bad? But I must have agreed with him because I immediately went on a diet to lose the weight and become the woman that he wanted to walk down the aisle with. And it worked. I lost about 35 pounds, and I was feeling amazing. And I went clothes shopping and pulled a size 8 dress off the rack, and it fit. And I was ecstatic because the smallest I'd ever been was a size 9. So I brought it home, and I put it on, and I modeled it for him just like I was on a catwalk. I was feeling so good. And he said, "Honey, I am so proud of you. When are you going to be a size 6? To this day, I don't know why he wanted to marry somebody he wasn't attracted to. And I spent decades trying to figure out why I still married him a week later, because I don't think I need to tell you that it got a whole lot worse. And it wasn't just about the weight, but I gained every pound of that back and then some. And I did get pregnant, and gained a lot more. But my body was so repulsive to him that he never once touched my belly throughout my entire pregnancy, and it was his child growing inside of me. I was so unhappy, miserable really, from the very beginning. And I spent far too many years and way too much effort trying to make something work that never had a shot in the first place. And I tell my story for a couple of reasons, and here's the first one. The fact that I was so unhappy for so long, and the fact that my marriage was a failure, those are 100% my fault, completely on me. Because what I now know is that when you're in a relationship and being treated poorly, the mere act of staying sends a message to the other person that you must be okay with it. Why else would you still be there? My marriage license was a piece of paper telling him that he could continue to treat me exactly the same way because I was so okay with it. I was signing up for life. He didn't do anything I didn't give him permission to do. And so I tell my story to myself because if I'm ever going to have healthy relationships of any kind with boundaries, then I need to do a much better job at recognizing those warning signs because they were all there and everyone else saw them and everyone else tried to point them out to me. But see, my friends and family assumed that not only could I see those red flags, but that I also had the power to do something about them. And the truth is, I didn't see the red flags for what they really were, but I also lacked the tools to be independent. And this is why I'm sharing my story with you tonight, because maybe you have someone in your life that you fear is allowing themselves to be mistreated. And you can't say anything because they should listen to you, but they won't. And you're going to put your relationship with them on the line if you do. So I'm going to suggest an alternative. Delicately, if you must, ask your loved one. In a worst case scenario, if something were to happen and they didn't marry that person or take that job or move out of state, whatever the situation is, what is their backup plan? Because maybe they need your help developing one. You can't assume that they know how to fill out a budget. I was an educated woman. I had no idea. You can't assume that they have a place to live for 3 months or 6 months while they work things through. I didn't. Maybe if someone helped them to develop other options, maybe they would choose a healthier one and have a different story. I am so grateful to my friends and family who never gave up on me. They continued to point out the bits and pieces of my own story that I appeared blind to. And eventually, I did see it. And eventually, I realized life just didn't have to have that much drama in it. And I got out. And I was so happy. I was finally living the life that I deserved, the life I dreamed of. My 40s were fabulous. I lost weight, but I did it for me. And for the first time ever, not only was I beginning to accept my body, I was actually starting to love my body. And then my body betrayed me and gave me cancer. And I share my cancer story because I wish more people had shared theirs with me. Does that surprise you? I know, people are awfully quick to tell you they had cancer, but I needed way more intimate details than that. I thought the worst part was going to be the nausea and the vomiting. But the nurses gave me so many steroids to keep me from vomiting. The problem is those steroids also produced awful constipation. And in a beautiful world, the constipation from the steroids would balance with the diarrhea from the chemo, and I would have lovely bathroom visits. But cancer is cruel and doesn't work that way. And the constant constipation produced hemorrhoids that were made so much more excruciating because then I would have the diarrhea on top of that. I would sit there for hours in so much agony, but be afraid to leave the toilet for fear of having an accident. And this lasted for days after every weekly chemo. And hemorrhoids and diarrhea, those are gross. People don't want to talk about that sort of stuff. But I was raised on a farm, and I'm a middle school science teacher. There's nothing too gross I haven't seen, heard, or done. And I needed to talk to somebody, but all I had was my doctor who kept prescribing things that didn't work. Or I'd read Amazon reviews, and I would be buying things that didn't work. Even months after my last chemo, I still couldn't use the bathroom without crying. Until finally a friend shared her story with me and told me to try raw potato. I'm serious. Go home and Google it. I finally got relief by applying raw potato. And I get it. I'm not trying to judge. Once you've already lived through the hell of cancer, you don't want to relive it by telling your story. But I really wish more women had shared their experience with me when I had to make a decision about my surgery. Do I get a lumpectomy, a mastectomy, a double mastectomy? Do I do flap surgery, reconstruction, silicone, saline? How the hell should I know? I had nothing to go by. And the doctors weren't going to make that decision for me. I remember thinking, well, women get fake boob jobs all the time, right? And supposedly you guys can't even tell the difference. So I'm just going to get a couple of perky new boobs, right? Well, no. They pointed out that those women don't get them hacked off and they can feel them afterwards, so it's not quite the same thing. And then my surgeon pointed out that my tumor was only in one breast. Why would we cause such trauma to a healthy part of my body by removing the other one too? Well, that sounded like it made sense to me, right? But see, she didn't prepare me for what it would look like or what it would feel like. How could she? She hadn't done it herself. My breasts are 2 different shapes and 2 different sizes. And for somebody who has struggled with her body image her whole life, that asymmetry is really hard. And they don't make tops for women whose breasts are the same. Every morning, I have to MacGyver up a 56-year-old sagging breast like 6 inches to be in line with my new perky one. And bra shopping is a nightmare. They're 2 different sizes and 2 different shapes. And keep in mind, I teach middle school, so bra shopping has never been easy for me. I don't want 14-year-old boys sitting in front of me and have a lacy, sexy bra strap showing, or my nipples show. Ew. But do you know what's worse than having my nipples show? Only having one nipple show. Who knew it would bother me to only have one nipple? I don't even think I realized I was going to only have one nipple. I'm not saying I would have made a different choice. I don't know. I'll never know. I just feel that if more of the cancer survivors that I'd talked to had been willing to share just a little bit more of their intimate details with me, I would have gone into any decision and gone through the process feeling more confident and better prepared. I mean, sure, I get it, it's embarrassing. You now know that I was shoving shredded raw potato down my adult diapers. And yeah, it's gonna be awkward when you see me on the street. You're gonna be averting your eyes because you don't want it to look like you're trying to figure out which one's the real one. But I don't care, because 1 in 3 people are going to get cancer, and 1 in 7 women are going to get breast cancer. So if by sharing my story, I can help any of them to navigate those awful waters, then it's worth it for me to be a little bit embarrassed and for you to feel a little awkward, don't you think? Because cancer is cruel. Do you know what the first thing was that my oncologist said to me? You've got the kind of cancer you gain weight on. Seriously, there's like 2, and I got one of them. And then she said, whatever you do, don't hide away from life under the covers. Chemo works best on people who are active. And I thought, really, lady? If I liked exercise, do you think I'd have a weight problem? But as I sat there listening to her explain to me that I had the most aggressive form of cancer and that I would require the most aggressive treatment, I realized I needed to do something to keep from wallowing in self-pity. I needed to serve a greater good. And since it was time for me to be my own superhero, I started volunteering with a local animal rescue, Superheroes Humane Society. And while I was volunteering, this beautiful white Australian shepherd with blue eyes came into the program. But he had such a sad story. He was the product of irresponsible breeding, which caused him to be deaf, have possible vision and neurological issues, and he'd been so severely mistreated by his original owners that if anyone approached him, he either nipped or he bit them. But I took him home. And once trust was established, it was a beautiful thing. And I loved him so much. He made me laugh. We played together all the time. He made sure I exercised because I had to walk him morning, noon, and night. He brought me joy on even my darkest chemo days, and I truly believe he helped me with my battle against cancer. But sadly, I wasn't a very good leader to him. I had no idea how to care for a special needs dog, and I couldn't find anybody else that did either. So I kept hiring different trainers, but they kept contradicting the previous one, and of course he never displayed his worst behaviors while the trainer was there, so the trainer would leave and he would act out, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do, and I was still in treatment, and I had no energy, and chemo brain is real. I was confused all the time. And his fear aggression just got worse and worse, and we would go on our walks, and he would just start lunging at people in this barking frenzy, trying to bite their heads off. And so I would quickly tell his story and say, I'm sorry, he's deaf, I'm sorry, he's been abused, I've rescued him, because my hope was that at least if he did bite them, that they would feel sorry for him and they wouldn't sue me. And it worked. I didn't get sued, but he did bite. He bit my friends, and he bit my mom. And this just made me more anxious, and he fed off of my anxiety, so he got more anxious. And to give you an idea of just how clueless I was, we had determined that he had about 5% hearing. So I thought, okay, he can hear a little, so I just need to always be loud. Well, I'm already loud, but I really amped it up. So I was always yelling to him no matter what, which was just stupid. Because for one thing, he didn't need me to yell, he needed an effective form of communication that's different. And also I teach science, and so I know that if you raise your voice, your heart beats faster, and he read my elevated heart rate as stress, which stressed him out more, which stressed me out more, and the next thing you know, he bit me. And it was bad. There was a lot of blood, and I was truly afraid of my dog. And I called the director at the time of Superheroes because I knew that she did everything in her power to avoid euthanasia. But she knew his story, and when I told her what happened, she said he broke all the rules and needed to be put down. My veterinarian agreed with her, and I contacted over 20 Australian Shepherd rescues across the country. And they all either couldn't help me or said he needed to be put down. But by this point, I'd become a board member of the rescue. It's my job to help animals, not hurt them, and I knew none of the circumstances were his fault. He wasn't a mean dog, he was just scared. And I knew I had failed him. But most importantly, I truly believed he helped save my life. How could I possibly end his? So I decided to tell his story one more time on social media. And this trainer, Kate, saw it. And she listened on the phone through my sobs for over an hour while I told her everything I knew about my dog. And when I was done, she said the hardest words I have ever had to hear. She said, "Lisa, I know I can help your dog. I want to work with your dog. It's you I don't want to work with." She said, "I get it. You tell his story because it absolves you of the responsibility. It's not your fault he bites. He's been abused. It's not your fault he can't be trained. He's deaf." But then she said, "I don't care if it's a person or an animal and how badly they've been abused. Everyone has the right to overcome their past and live happy, healthy, successful lives. And I don't care if it's a person or an animal and what their disability is. Everyone has the right to overcome their disability and live happy, healthy, successful lives. And every time you tell his story, you are denying him that opportunity. Stop telling his story." Do you remember my story from just a few minutes ago? Why are we so slow to see behaviors in ourselves that we are so quick to recognize in others? Because I bet every single one of us in this room could name somebody else in our lives that at this moment is using some kind of label, whether it's a disability, a diagnosis, a past trauma, some circumstance. They are using that label as an excuse to get out of doing something that would make them uncomfortable. And we know that's just a short-term fix. We know in the long term, if they could overcome that label, that circumstance, they would be stronger, they would be empowered, and they would have the whole world at their feet. But we can't say that, because if we do, we're accused of lacking empathy. But sometimes I wonder, if my friends and family decades ago had hit me over the head as hard as Kate did, how would my story be different today? Kate didn't stop. She said, "If your children had been born with a disability, wouldn't you still provide them with the tools they need to succeed? If you have a student in your classroom and you know she's going through trauma at home, aren't you still going to teach her the skills she needs to be successful? Why are you not being the parent and the leader and the teacher that your dog needs you to be just because you feel sorry for him? And that's the ticket. I am a teacher and I should know better. Because in the world of education, we do not allow these labels to victimize our students and hold them back. In the world of education, we use empathy. They might not think so, but we do. And we use these opportunities instead as ways to problem solve so that we can find the right strategies and supports that our students need in order to overcome those labels and live the lives that they deserve unhindered. See, Kate knew what those strategies and supports were that my dog needed. And it took a lot of begging, but she finally agreed to work with us. And I say us because I needed to be trained as much as he did. And I can tell you, it has been some of the hardest work I have ever known. Cancer might have been easier, but I haven't regretted it for one moment because today my dog is a completely different dog. He doesn't have nightmares anymore. His ears finally flop the way an Australian Shepherd should because there's no tension between his shoulder blades. He runs up to strangers to be pet and is living the most beautiful, anxiety-free life. And what else is incredible is that in order to transform my dog, I had to transform myself. Because to become the leader he needed me to be, I had to become the leader I needed me to be. And I now lead both of our lives calmly, confidently, and in control of my options. See, when we tell our stories, we need to ask ourselves, are we doing it so that we can be reminded of the lessons that we've learned and not repeat our past mistakes? Are we sharing our stories with others so that they can gain from our experiences and be more informed? Or, when we tell our stories, are we actually reinforcing the excuses that are holding us back, keeping us from doing the hard work we should in order to reach our true potential? See, my dog and I, we're living our best lives. We are the best versions of ourselves despite the abuses of our past and despite our bodies betraying us, because I've finally figured out which stories to tell and which ones not to. Thank you. Good job. Good job.